Cool. Hope you guys don't mind. I love coffee, so I'm going to drink coffee while we do this. But I wanted to start and just kind of show you a brief video. And this is one region that we work in. And then just like to present some other information to you. But we'll just start with this, okay? All right, here we go. If it'll work.
Would you like the light off?
Sure. It might be easier to see if you do. Oh, yeah.
That might be on our hands.
I'm as high as I can go. So.
Yeah, it's probably on our hands.
Okay, well, let's pause. Yep. Come on. There we go. Does this have an incorporated speaker?
Yes, it does. So, let's go ahead and try it.
Okay.
Try me out. No.
No? There it is. Yeah, go ahead and click that if you put it pen up down on there.
I know.
There you go. All right, we're in business. Okay, I'm going to go back.
I just, we all too much. It's dark.
Oh, yeah. All the way. Not much.
This is the area, in this neighborhood, there are 2 gospel churches for 250,000 people. There you go. We pull up the Pico and Waldo. One of the great challenges for growing works is the cost of land. In Lima, land values are out of control in a city of over 11 million. So 1.3 million for this, 800,000 for that, 2 million for just this. Hi there, we're Cole and Debbie Albright, missionaries with ABW, focus in the work of church planting. Our work in church planting is a 3-step journey. We begin by exploring part of the community. In so doing, we thoroughly assess the people, the needs, and consider the best practices and connection for a future church launch. We assess current church health, the ability to support a new work, and the giftedness of a planter and key national team members. Next, we equip and train and encourage local leaders, preparing them for success. Do you have to do this every Sunday? This? Oh, yeah. We got to train more fans. This takes a long time. We help fill gaps in processes, overcome challenges, and work towards putting together a comprehensive plan that acts as a guide for the team to come together with laser focus as we pray, fast, and prepare. Finally, we launch. Launching a new church plan requires a significant leap of faith, marked by prayer, fasting, and dependence on God. This process, while both exciting and daunting, is essential for the multiplication of the gospel. It involves extensive preparation, including securing resources, equipment, facilities, and mobilizing the team, all aimed at establishing a healthy and effective ministry of the gospel. God used Cole to really lead up the initiative of taking our church to the commitment of raising money. And our church's heartbeat is to plant other churches. God is using Cole even now to really lead us and push us towards planting another church for next year. That will be a very helpful situation. Soy muy feliz, hermanos, porque Dios permitió misericordia a hermano Ana. Tengo más gozo que el futuro, nuevas estrategias, nuevos conocimientos para poder servir mejor al Señor. 3 días, 3 noches 2006, donde ya aseguramos plantar una iglesia en Perú. Queremos agradecer por el ministerio de Ana y Levi, ha sido de mucha bendición cuando han estado en Perú, son de mucha bendición ahora que están en los Estados Unidos, nos cada semana, nos han ayudado con la visión, nos han ayudado con la claridad del proyecto de plantación de iglesias.
Alright, so that hopefully gives you guys just a view of kind of what we work with. So here, I'm just gonna open, I don't know how to open this properly.
Open slideshow.
Is that what I do? This here? No. Joe, can you run that for me? I have no idea what I'm doing. Sorry, I have people that love me enough to help me with these things, and so thanks, Joe. But I am not good with technology at all. So how many of you guys can relate to that? Okay, so I'm a younger version of that. Like, I just think at technology, but love working with people. So, cool. So I can click through. So we're Cole and Debbie Albright. You guys have supported us for about 5 years. So part of today is just kind of, I want to give you guys an update of kind of what's gone on over the last 5 years. And so you guys started supporting us while we were on pre-field. And in 2022, we set out for Peru as a family. So we shoved all our stuff in a shipping container and we moved to Lima. And we went there with the specific goal of not necessarily being a lead church planter. We didn't want to come in as the foreigner and lead a church plant, but we did want to train nationals. So probably the biggest thing that attracted us to Latin America, besides the fact that I already spoke Spanish, was that there was a missionary there. And God was doing amazing work. In Lima, so Lima's, and I'm just going to talk about Lima for a bit, and then there's several other regions we're going to cover. But Lima is a city of about, well, their last census said there are 11.5 million people. It's probably closer to 13 million. So it's just this very congested city. It's the second biggest city in the world that's built on a desert. And so if you have seen pictures of like Cairo, Egypt, like just like, that's the first largest city. So a lot of people are like, oh, I've seen pictures of Cairo. It kind of looks like that in Lima. So anything that you see in these pictures that's green or growing gets watered by hand every other day. So think about that. Like, it's a main job in that city. People go out, like gardeners go out with hoses, and they have to water, because water is such a precious commodity. So you don't just like let the sprinkler roll and maybe forget about it. Like, you have to, it's very different there. And so we lived in Lima for 2 years, and our express goal was to help bring health to a church that was going, that had already been planted by a missionary, and it was going well. And by the way, when I say missionary, this guy, I don't view him as an American. He is an American, but he's a second generation missionary. He grew up in Lima. This is home to him. Like, he's culturally, he is Peruvian, and he's a great dude, loves Jesus, and fantastic guy, but he's very Peruvian in the way he thinks and the way he does things. And so he says to me, when he was on furlough one year, when he had invited Debbie and I to consider putting down our business and working with him in Lima, he said, hey, I really need a team around me. I've had a hard time building a team. And so Debbie and I, we went and visited, and we decided, and we met with you guys and a bunch of other folks to support our ministry going to Peru. We went there with the express intent of helping build health within the local church and identify and raise up church planters that would be nationals. We believe wholeheartedly that the best person to reach Americans is Americans, the best person to, the best people to reach Peruvians are Peruvians, and Colombians, Colombians, and all of that. And so if you can imagine, and people are like, well, why is that? Why not just, go do that yourself? Well, if somebody were to come to Union and say, man, this town needs a gospel church, and let's pretend like a Mexican immigrant came in as a missionary and said, I'm going to lead a gospel church plant in Union, Iowa, culturally, you guys might not click 100% with someone with a completely different cultural background. So Debbie and I are not unaware. We're very white. We're very North American. And so we're like, our kid, we have obviously adopted kids as well. But we're very American. So our goal was not to come in and be like, hey, follow this guy. It was more like, hey, how can we help build health here and raise up church planters that they themselves would be win some culturally connected, able to replicate in their own context, and so that was our heart and our goal, and we jumped in with Steve and Kelly Fricks in that mission. So these are our kids, by the way, and these 4 kids, I just want to tell you something really cool about them. They are troopers. These kids have moved more times than I think any kid should have to move. When we hit Peru, it was so funny because we were in a house and we needed to get our visas. The way the visa process works there is that you go into the country with a tourist visa, and then you go through an application process, and your visa gets turned into like a residence visa. Well, the problem is we entered, like, we in Iowa, we had forgotten COVID existed by the end of 2022, but like this is now entering 2023. We couldn't get, there's still all these COVID restrictions in the city of Lima, and so they wouldn't give us an appointment in Lima because it was too backlogged, and basically everything was doing online, and then you had to go in specifically. And they said, hey, if you go to one of the provinces, maybe we can get you your visa process going. So we had to drive to a place called Trujillo, which was 11 hours up the coast through the desert, and we put our kids in the van, and they were like crying because they thought we were moving again. We were going to be gone for 3 days, and they're like, oh, we're moving again. But these kids have been great troopers, and just now they actually enjoy the travel piece of it, but they were really concerned that we were moving after just being there a few months. So, which we didn't. We didn't move then. But we jumped into an established work, and that established work was in Lima. That church had grown to about 160 people, which is like by Lima standards of, you're like, well, it's a city of 11 million. That's a really tiny church. By Lima standards, it's actually a very healthy size of a church. In fact, it's like, people would look at that and go, wow, that's like the dream, because traffic is such a huge issue in a city that's congested. So in an average week while we lived in Lima, I would spend roughly almost an entire full day, like if you accumulated all the hours, almost an entire full working day just stuck in traffic. Like that's how the congestion is there. So like I just share that with you, not to be like, oh, poor me, I was stuck in traffic, but that's just how it is. So what took me an hour distance-wise today would have, in the city context, that would have taken 6-7 hours to get here today. So like it wasn't just it's that congested. There's people upon people upon people upon traffic, and by the way, they're in the foothills of the Andes, and so there's like these ridges and stuff. They got to go around and up, and like it might be just over there, but you got to go that way and all the way around to get there, and the traffic that goes with it. So it is challenging. But the church was about 160. This is an outdoor service that I preached a couple of years ago on, this was actually a Christmas service. So this was like 2 days before Christmas, and if I remember correctly. And so the church at this point had started to really grow. So you see there's more than 160 people there if you start counting. But when we got there, there's 160 people, and the missionary, the church planner, he's like, hey, I really need a team. And the first thing Debbie and I realized within the very first month was, oh my goodness, he has a team. He just doesn't have any idea how to manage a team. Like, have you ever met somebody, they're like, I don't have this, and you're like, you do, you don't see it, right? And so, and it wasn't a knock or a fault on him, it wasn't his giftedness. He's a fantastic preacher, fantastic teacher of God's word, fantastic evangelist, and like, he really had the gift of evangelism, but like, if you've ever met a good evangelist, they need people to help them with the administrative side of things. So really, right away, we got to jump straight in with working with people, and for me, specifically men. And so, as I was working with men in different families, God placed it on mine and Debbie's heart. We realized culturally within Latin America, and I kind of knew this was true, but when you live it, it becomes like on steroids, where young people are often treated in their context like teenagers. So when I say young people, I'm talking like 20 to 30-year-olds are treated a lot like teenagers with bank accounts. And I know that sounds crazy, but if you can imagine a culture that basically says that until you've crested the age of 30, there's not much value you can add to the church. There's not much value you're adding to your family other than just being present. You probably shouldn't get married before you're 30. Like that's the culture in Lima. Now in the provinces, it's different, but the biggest city in the country has 1/3 of the entire population of that country in that one city. And so culturally, this is a big deal. And so we realized as we got to know the culture, with a heart of like, hey, I want to raise up church planters. Like, I was already in my head targeting younger men. I'm like, we need to start the discipleship process early so that by the time they're mature and ready, they can launch. And so that really started developing things. So this guy right here, his name is Arturo Ledesma, and he was leading the men's, here, I'm going to move this, the men's discipleship group at this church at the time. And he was really burnt out. He had been in the early days of the church plant. The church had been planted in 2011. And so he had just been leading and serving. He's just a lay servant. And I was there for a very short period of time, just helping him, our little Bible study of men. I was the youngest guy there. So here I am, 37 years old at the time, youngest guy in the group, because you don't really become a man until you're after 30. And so, at least in their cultural context. And I was like, where's all the men? Where's all the men? I see these young men, and I see these older, and like, where's all the men? And there's only about 6 or 8 guys coming to this group. And he came to me one night and just said, everyone there calls me Alan. That's because my name's Cole, and Cole in Spanish means cabbage. And so instead of going by my first name, I go by my middle name in that context, because introducing yourself as cabbage repeatedly gets old. So, so he was like, hey, Alan, I really need you to take this over and just, I said, hey man, I would love to help you. And he was like, no, I need you to take this. And I said, okay, great. So I'm going to change everything about it, just so you know. And he was like, that's great. Let's do that. And so one of the very first things we were able to do is start to work with not only old men, but young men. And what that did was that ended up drawing in a lot of the biblical principles that we learn in the New Testament, the one to another, older men teaching younger men serving the church. And what we saw was young men start to really grow up in their role of being a young man, not a kid with a bank account. And what we saw is older men start to really have a lot of joy in being able to invest in younger men and work alongside them. And God really grew that ministry. And so from that ministry came all sorts of leadership. And within the context of that, we were able to begin organizing the church in a fashion that was healthy, helping people identify giftedness, helping people identify their strengths and their weaknesses, and kind of help, when you've got somebody at the door that's greeting, that's an introvert, that's probably not the best spot for them. I'm like, hey, you would do really good in the sound booth. And you got somebody that's a total extrovert sweeping the floor. I'm like, I love that you sweep the floor, but can you go greet at the door? And just helping, and I know that sounds really silly, and to even saying it out loud sounds silly, but just those little things make all the difference when the body of Christ is functioning the way the body of Christ should, which is people operating and serving Christ in their gifts and abilities. And what we saw from that was a different, the church started to feel very different. So as a visitor, you come in and suddenly you're being greeted warmly. Things are organized, things are put together, like your experience at church is good, and it removes the distraction so that you can hear the gospel preached. And what we saw is people really started to like this, and more people started coming, and of course our pastor being a great evangelist, leading people to Christ. We got to lead people to Christ, and baptisms go up, and next thing you know, in about 2 years, our church went from 160 to 250. And God gets all the credit and the glory for that, but he was doing amazing things as God's people were raised up, as young men started leading. And as the church as a whole started to catch a vision for church planting. And that's really important. Now, this region that I've got a picture here, this is one of the regions we're working in right now that is not Lima. This is called Villarrica. It's a small town. It's about 11,000 people. So instead of 11 million, 11,000. And it is a coffee growing country. And so there is one itty bitty little church of less than 30 people in this town. And they've been around a long time. And I'll get more into Villarrica later, but I'll tell you the challenges that we're working through with them. But while I was in Lima, I met this man. His name is Wilbur Centeno. He was one of the men that was suddenly attracted to the ministry we were doing in Lima through the men's discipleship. They actually had moved to our area, not believers, and his wife was like, and by the way, their marriage was in the toilet when we met them. We didn't know it, right? Like on the outside, everything looked good. They had been separated for a year prior to 1 month before I met them. Didn't know it. They come in and, we're going to, we started with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, she has 3 20-something-year-old sons and a teenage daughter. And the two of them together. And so they'd been separated, got back together. She was like, we really need God in our life. where's a church? She connected with our church. One of the people in our church started coming. Her oldest son starts coming to our church. He's coming to my men's Bible study, working with this guy. And Wilbur he's a business guy. He's like, he does all the things. He's self-reliant, self-sufficient, every bit of pride that you can think of that a guy in his position would have, he had that. But it broke him because he was like, what does this church have that I don't, that my family needs? And so he starts coming. And we instantly connected with him. He's a super nice guy, but inside, all men have pride. And he would be the first to tell you that. And I would echo that as well. It's just even a born-again Christian, pride is a serious thing. And so he starts coming, he starts hearing the gospel. And in time, one night, we're at our men's Bible study, and I'm teaching the men, and I see something in Wilbur, and so did our pastor Jorge, and he is the next guy, and I'll show you. He's this guy right here. Pastor Jorge sees him, he's Peruvian, and he goes up to Wilbur and says, hey, can I talk to you for just a second? Pulls him right out of my Bible study. I'm like, Jorge, I think I'm going to lead this guy to Jesus. I'm thinking in my head, I'm going to lead this guy to Jesus tonight. Jorge beat me to it. He pulls him off to the side, shares with him, and Wilbur gives his life to Christ that night. And so I just want to go back one slide, because Wilbur is from Villarrica. And so over the next 2 years, we get to begin discipling Wilbur. Wilbur comes to Christ, and then his oldest son comes to Christ, and then his third son comes to Christ, and then his daughter comes to Christ, and then Elizabeth finally realizes, I'm not really saved. She was like, we need Christ and all this stuff, and she talked like a believer, but she realized in her heart she had never truly repented of her sins and been born again, and she was like, I need Jesus. She comes to Christ, and finally their second son comes to Christ. So God saves the whole family as we're going through this process of discipleship. Wilbur, he ends up enrolling. He's like, what do I need to do to get in ministry? Like, I want to serve people with my life. I want to this is good news. Like, God's completely changed my life. And he says, hey, my business is a place, I think I can hand it off to my sons. And so he's in the process of handing his business off to his sons to run. And he just wants to serve Jesus as a missionary in the context of Peru, right? So in Peru, for somebody to be a missionary just simply means they're not pastoring a specific church, but they're helping with the work in several locations. And his desire is to eventually go back to Villarrica and plant a church there where there's such little work going on. And so anyway, so that he's just a joy, and he's just one person I wanted to tell you about. There's several others I could, but he's definitely a joy to me. And so back to this guy. So in the process, while we were there in Peru, we spent, God just allowed Steve, he's the missionary, evangelist, pastor, great. He's white Peruvian, so, however you want to say that. And he leaves shortly after we got there because he had a 1-year furlough, or no, a 6-month furlough coming up. And so Steve was getting ready to hand off, and I said, well, hey, Jorge, and we were on the same page. Jorge should lead the church. I said, I don't need to lead the church while you're gone. Jorge needs to lead the church while you're gone. I'm going to help Jorge. And in the process of that, Jorge and I began meeting every week, and I said, hey, Jorge, I just want to let you know, I've been praying for you for 6 months. I really believe God's gifted you in evangelism, teaching, preaching. I think with a team around you, God could use you to plant a church in an area here in Lima. And so, to give you context, also culturally, this is very important. So in Latin America, they have a over 400-year history of foreign missionaries come in and start works, hand them off eventually to nationals, and then nationals run it from there. There's not a context by which nationals start new works. Okay? So when on the slide, on the video, it said, hey, in Iowa, there's about one gospel church to every 5,000 people in the state of Iowa. Okay? In Latin America, it's less than 1/3 that amount. Okay? And so the exposure to the gospel, like in the city of Lima, I was working in a district that actually has had reasonable exposure to the gospel by comparison, and there's one gospel church to every about 25,000 people in that context. And so the need for church planting is massive in that city, and it's really that over and over and over in different parts of Latin America, in Colombia, in Uruguay, in Argentina, in Chile, in Peru. So, and I'm sure Mexico, although I haven't been there at length, I know Mexico is a similar story from what I know. here. And so what happened is I started working with Jorge, and my question for him was this. I said, hey, Jorge, what's the job of a church planter and what's the job of a pastor? And he said, well, actually, it's missionaries' jobs to plant churches. It's not our job as nationals. Like, just flat out. That's what he told me. And I had asked that question of, in the 2 years I was there, over 60 pastors. I asked them the same question. Over 95% of them had the same answer. So it's a cultural thing. And so why is that important? Because in their context, my heart was always to help raise up national church planners. They don't even think that way. They don't think like, hey, this is a thing that we should do. And so my question to him was, what would happen if all the foreigners got kicked out? Then whose responsibility is it to reach these communities that don't have churches, that don't have gospel influence in their communities? Whose job? He goes, well, I guess in that case it would have to fall to us, but that's never going to happen. The same year, there was, I don't know if you heard of all the chaos that went on in Peru while we were there, but the president was impeached, arrested, Congress was in an uproar. We were like right on the cusp of what could have ended up being civil war. And thankfully it didn't go there, but there was multiple bills on the House and Senate floor about evicting all foreigners from Peru, all of us, like just blanketly getting rid of us. And that was big news. That was like, hey, this might happen. And it came to a vote, and I remember it was December, that first year we were there, and it was like, we were about to find out whether we were about to get exited from the country immediately or not. So if you can imagine that situation, so I got to go back to Jorge in that context and go, hey, whose job is this? Like, who should be responsible to reach all these people that don't know Christ? And he was like, and God really used that in his life as well as several other events and circumstances to lead him. We began praying and fasting together, and by the time Steve had returned from his 6-month furlough, Jorge, he was just like, I know God's leading me to plant churches. Like, he's given me every gift. I need help. And so we spent the next year helping equip that, and he's well on the path. So part of equipping that is not just bringing along the leadership, but then bringing along the church, right? Because the church has to have a heart for multiplying the gospel in their context. And so this little, and I say little, in their context, compared to millions of people, like 250 is not much, in this particular community. And they said, hey, we as a church, we'll support that. So Peruvian leader, working on putting together a Peruvian team and sending him out with Peruvian funds into an area of Peru that needs reached. And so we just praise God for that. This meeting happened, and this guy, he's going to be a core group member helping him plant that work. And that we were shooting for 2026. Long story short, it got pushed back 1 year, but 2027, that church should launch. I plan on being boots on the ground for that, specifically, Lord willing. But God's led this man to an area of the city called San Borja. San Borja is an area of the city that has 140,000 people, 2 small gospel churches present. The biggest one is 60 people. So, and he's like, I think God's leading me to plant a church right here and reach this group of people. And God has uniquely and specially gifted him for that, and we praise the Lord for it. So we did that for 2 years. We were in Lima for 2 years, living, breathing, doing all the things. And within that time frame, something became really obvious to Debbie and I, is that we went there to help build church health, and God allowed that to be very successful very quickly. And we went there to help establish a method and a framework by which Peruvians would plant churches. And God did that very quickly as well. We thought this was going to take 6 to 10 years, and it took 2. And we're like, okay, God, now what do we do now? And so we looked at other areas, like, should we move to this area and do the same thing? Should we go to this area? And we had multiple requests. We had requests in, when I say regions, you're not going to know what they are, but it basically be like, if we were in Iowa, we had requests from Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Missouri, Texas, like just all over, from other missionaries that had known Steve for 15, 20 years, and they're like, we see what God's doing there and how you've helped. Can you please come help us, because we're really struggling. And so Debbie and I, we were looking at that, and we prayed and fasted over it. We sought the counsel of our own local church here in Iowa, and then also our mission. And they were like, hey, this need is huge everywhere. Everywhere in Latin America, we're having this exact same struggle. Would you join our Live Global team? And so within ABWE, there's a team called Live Global. And what we do at Live Global is we home base literally wherever. And there's Live Global people all over the world, including in North America. And we travel into various regions, and we use the online platforms that have really come. When I say I'm low tech, I'm really good at putting together Zoom meetings and WhatsApp meetings and all that stuff, and bringing people into that context for the purpose of teaching and discipleship of men primarily. There's some ladies, but mostly men. And what we're doing now is we're working with nationals currently in 3, if you count the U.S., 4. So 4 countries. We're working with nationals, helping promote and encourage and train in the work of church planting in Latin America. And so what does that mean? Well, right now we home base in the United States. This is a group of men that I'm working with discipling. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 countries represented here. This guy right here, you can pray for him. His name is Carlos. I think God is going to raise him up. We're planning on sending him back to his country of origin, which is El Salvador, for the work of church planting. And so you can be praying for that man right there. This guy, his name is Oscar. He's from Peru, totally different end of the city, but God has really saved, well, for one, he's been recently saved in the last 6 years, and God's doing amazing work in him. He has ties in Peru that is causing the gospel to go forward there in some really neat ways. This guy here, he's Agustin. He's from the, I'm going to say it wrong, Oaxaca region of, I probably butchered that. Sorry, Augustine, if you catch this on the video, but he's from Mexico, and he is doing a great thing. This is just a meeting that we had just not even a month ago or so, and that's a regular study that we've got going, men that we're discipling. So not only am I zooming in online, teaching through a couple of seminaries, but I apologize, a couple of regions connected to the seminary through Bogota, Colombia. That's one of the regions we're in. So there's 3 places in Colombia right now around the Bogota region, which is also a major city, just like Lima, that are in need of church plants. We're working that way. And then also, I'm supposed to be, Lord willing, boots on the ground in Cucuta, which is on the Venezuela-Colombia border. And so establishing those relationships so we can start working with church planters there as well. But this training men in the work of church planting comes entirely from the book of Acts. So what we're doing is we're taking the book of Acts to the Peruvian or the Colombian or the Uruguayan or the Mexican context and saying, look, this is what God did with the early church, and this is what God will do with you if you'll just walk with him. And God's using that to raise up national church planters. So no longer the great white American church planter, but these guys, and it's really cool because we're helping bring the church along to support these guys. And so the local churches are able to raise these men up. It's just a joy. It's just a joy. I could go on, story time. So what do we do locally as well? Because there's only so many hours you can spend on a computer in a day, turns out. So I probably spend 30 hours on this computer every week to the bane of my existence. And so because I love being face to face with people. We are on FaceTime. We're going through the teachings. We're going through all this stuff with these men, and that's really joyful. Well, our local church, they wanted us to home base in Des Moines, so we have a house in Des Moines right near the airport. So as I'm traveling in and out, we can go. Well, the thing about that area is 25% of our community is Hispanic, including our next door neighbors. And so within that, Debbie and I, we had helped in 2008. We were part of the core team of Living Waters Fellowship that planted a church in South Des Moines in an area that multiple churches in 30 years had been attempted to be planted and had shut. And so we went down there. Our lead church planter is a guy named Josh Daggy. He still pastors there. And that was in 2008. That's when Debbie and I were 12. And so, no, I'm kidding. We were freshly married, and we helped plant a church. God used all those years to train us in the work of church planting. And we served in, I think I did 6 years as a deacon and another 4 years as a lay pastor and 4 years as the youth guy. So we were there 12 years before leaving for Peru. And they encouraged us, hey, come back because while we were in the States, we had started a Spanish ministry in 2016. We were like, hey, let's try to reach some of these Hispanics in our community. See what God would do with that. By 2017, we were live translating all of the sermons. So every single Sunday, we're live translating sermons. And there's Hispanics that come in, they put the little earbuds in, runs through the switchboard. You got somebody in the booth that somebody was me for the first 3 years. Just live translating sermons, which is really hard because Pastor Josh talks fast. So, as I left, I handed off to a guy. Where's Chris? You see him?
He's at the top there.
Is he? There's Chris. So I handed off to this guy who I'd been discipling, and he has a Hispanic wife. And I said, Chris, I just keep going with this. God's doing a great work, and you keep going. I came back, and our group had nearly doubled in size from the time I left to the time we get back. And Chris was like, I'm so glad you're back. And he tried to like hand it back. And I was like, no, Chris, I'm doing all this stuff, but I'll help you. We'll throw some gas on this fire and see what God would do. A year later, we launched what we call our third service. So our church is big enough. We have 2 services. There's about 400 people on a Sunday now that would come and name our church. We started a third service. This is represented the third service, all in Spanish. So 100% in Spanish, worship's in Spanish, preaching's in Spanish, and we started what we decided would be a soft start. So this year, just to test it, see if this is going to go anywhere. So once a month, third Sunday of every month, there's a third service. Either myself or Chris preach the message. We're leading that, and we're discipling. So represented here, Mexico. The Dominican, El Salvador, Colombia, Peru, Dominican Republic, and Honduras. So that's what's represented in this group, is right here. And what's really cool is that at least in this group, there's at least 2 guys that we're working with right now that we're hopeful to send back to their country of origin for the work of church planting. And so God's just kind of doing that even in our local context here in Iowa. And I'm just going to go ahead and shut that because I don't know how to shut it down properly. But like God's doing a great work in Hispanic and Latin American church planting. By God's grace, we're hopeful to see the very first all-national launch this next year, and hoping to see a few more in the next couple of years thereafter. And so we're just praying in that direction. It's not in our hands. We would love to be like, oh, we've got full control of this. This is just how God's using us, and it's been really a huge joy. We also do normal people stuff and menial stuff. My boys cut grass. My kids raise chickens. People are like, well, what do you do with family life? Looks very, very fun. We're putting in our big project we're working on right now, which I looped Joe into helping me tomorrow. So, but we're putting a patio into our backyard, which I cannot afford to put in because it's expensive to have that much concrete poured. So he's going to help me do this, and we're going to do it on the cheap. But our goal is to, especially Latin culture, in the summer, outside barbecues is how you connect with them. Like if you invite them over and want to do inside stuff, it's not going to happen. But if you invite them to a barbecue, it's like game on. And so we're putting this patio in, and we're going to put the little, whatever the sunshade thing is. And, we've got this nice sized backyard, and Grandma and Grandpa gave us this pop-up swimming pool. And so we're like, all right, we're going to use our backyard to really draw our neighborhood in. I just want to say publicly, like, I'm so proud of my son Liam. He has gone around our neighborhood and met every 10 to 12-year-old boy there is, Hispanic or otherwise. And our house constantly is flooded with these boys and their families. And God's using that to open gospel doors, just even in South Des Moines, and so it's really joyful. And big shout out to my wife. We were literally just talking about this dumb patio project that I hate the work part of it. I'm really excited for the use part of it, but like the work stinks. And I was like, well, hey, what do you think? I was talking to her rhythm schedule. She's like, hey, when that thing's up, we need to start having people in, like Hispanics, in every single week. And so she's just like, wanting to use that as a place to share the gospel. And so it's joyful. It's joyful. But now for me, I'm on the road sometimes, okay? Like I fly into Villarrica, I fly into Colombia, I fly into Arequipa, I fly into Lima, Uruguay, Montevideo, like all these areas. some of the areas I go, I would ask you just pray for us as well, because when I'm on the road, I'll be on the road 10 to 14 days at a time usually, which is hard on my wife, and hard on the kids. But just pray for us. It turns out coffee growing country is also cocaine growing country, and it's not the safest place in the world that we tread. But God's been really gracious to us thus far, and we continue praying in that direction. I remember one time, Debbie and I got stuck on the side of a mountain in Honduras. That was fun. So your car breaks down, you're out in the middle of nowhere, and people go walking by with machetes, and you're just like, oh boy. So and it's real life down there where corruption's huge. Like the culture is not here where you could count on calling 911 and it going well. And so just keep praying for us as we do those things, and God's been gracious thus far. So that's sort of God. I know you guys have lots of questions. Well, maybe you don't, but if you do, I'd love to answer them.
So obviously, big changes in the way we do missions nowadays.
Yeah.
I'm kind of anxious to understand. I mean, that had to be a process to kind of adapt your thinking and how that's gone, like in other churches that support.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So our thinking originally, my thought was, because we were thinking, where else do we move from Lima? Like we've done the work in Lima, God's got it. Like part of allowing nationals to take leadership is getting out of the way. You just have to get out of the way. And unfortunately, the longer we stayed, the more we realized like we were starting to create reliance that was not healthy. And so we realized that, and if our goal is to help, then sometimes we don't want to help in a way that hurts, right? Like you don't give somebody asking for drug money on the side of the road money, maybe give them a bottle of water and a pack of nuts or something. Like you're not gonna, and so and I'm not suggesting the Peruvian church is drug dealers or whatever, so please don't mishear me. But what I am saying is that sometimes presence, like physical constant presence is not healthy presence. And we saw that, unfortunately, that the big thing that really caused us to even consider being stateside at all, because that was a hard transition for our family. We were like, are you kidding me? We shut down our life, we sold our house, we shipped all of our stuff to Peru. We had no intention of coming back except for furlough, and that was it. And so then we got to, go through the painful process of like selling everything we had for pennies on the dollar and coming back with a handful of suitcases and everything that went with that. So how did we get there? Well, while in Lima, I mentioned traffic, right? It's very common in Latin America for the traffic to just be awful. And so what we found was that about 60% of the effective ministry meetings that we were already doing, about 60% of them were already online. They're already online. So I'm in the same city on Zoom. Same city on WhatsApp. That was common practice. Thursday night prayer meeting at the church, it's all online. I still go to prayer meeting in Lima every week with this group of people. So like leadership meeting every Tuesday, I'm there. It's like clockwork. Why? Because traffic is awful. It's awful. And I know that sounds crazy, but if you have the choice of spending an hour and a half in traffic for an hour-long meeting, or just clicking in for an hour, what do you choose, right? And so that was what was going on a ministry front, that outside of Sunday mornings and then personal in-home meetings, like most of the leadership training stuff that was like what you would say that's my job, right, to work with that, was online already. And so that's true of many places, including like most seminaries, and that's mostly in the wake of COVID, by the way. So COVID kind of put fuel. It was already heading that way, but COVID just put fuel on that fire. And so even the seminaries, like the Lima Seminary, the Bogota Seminary, they're already primarily online right now. Like, so missionaries that serve in these seminaries are in the same city doing online coursework with their students. So, yeah.
So how have you found supporting churches and their attitude toward that?
Some of them are like, we love what you're doing, we think it's great and efficient and all that stuff, and it sounds like you're able to get more done. And others are like, we don't like that you're in the States.
That's different.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah, so so just truthfully, we've been dropped by several churches. So when we left for Peru, we had 16 churches that support us. We currently have 9. So yeah, it's been a challenge.
So what's the competing religion?
Catholicism primarily, unless you're in Uruguay, and then it's atheism.
Is it hard to change their minds?
Oh, really?
You know, I will say, I love the Catholic Church for this. They teach the Trinity. You don't have to go anywhere with that. They teach that Jesus Christ is Savior. They just are a little bit messed up in how you get there, you know, like, because they teach works salvation, right? And so to get people to it's, whereas in Uruguay, for example, so like, and it's region by region, so it's a great question. Peru, 87% Roman Catholic. Colombia is almost the exact same scenario. Chile is maybe 50%, and then it's got a lot of Pentecostal influence. And then Uruguay, over 40% identify as atheist. They've got the highest suicide rate per capita for people between the ages of 17 and 30. So per capita, highest suicide rate, massive depression. Why? Because they're people without hope, right? Like, if there's no God, what's the point of all this, right? And so that's a huge struggle. So whereas in Peru, we can literally start at the gospel. Colombia, we can literally start at the gospel most of the time. In Uruguay, we start at theology proper. In the beginning, God, right? And we have to establish an entire framework to have a gospel conversation. So it's very,
Another question, a little bit off that topic, but I'm just, you said you had to sell everything when you came back. Are you pretty much outfitted in your home? I'll ask your wife that, because she probably knows more. What she wishes she might have that she had to give up.
You don't need something I've learned in all this coming and going, you don't really need that much to live. Sometimes stuff is more of a burden than a blessing, but we have enough. We have what we need. When we first got to Peru, we lived with a 12 by 12 fridge and a hot plate for a long time, and not enough dishes, and so we had to wash dishes just to make it work. So I mean, you don't need as much as you think. After living that way, like I feel like we have plenty. We have all the
Beds for everybody.
Yeah, it took us a little while, but yeah, we have enough. We have what we need.
yeah.
So.
And people were very kind to us. When we first got back, we moved into a missionary house that we stayed in for, 8 or 9 months, something like that. I don't remember exactly. And so it was funny because it was fully outfitted. So we had everything we need. We had clothes in our bags. Well, then, we needed, of course, that's not a long-term solution. There's always missionaries coming and going, and they said, hey, we've got this block for you. And we were like, hey, thank you so much. And, we home based, and we did the whole looking for a house within our means. And we found this fixer-upper in South Des Moines near the airport. And we're like, okay, great, so we'll fix her up. And people are like, well, when it was finally time to move, our church was like, so, hey, tell us when you're moving so we can send a team to help you move. I'm like, we don't need help loading the back of the car with a few bags that we have, because that was like all we had. And so people realized, like, oh my goodness, they don't even own like beds and stuff. So people were doing that. Like, there was a couple of people that gave us, a few $1,000s, and we bought beds and we bought secondhand couches, and we're pretty thrifty when it comes to making things work. So have we gotten back to where we were? No. Are we fine? Yeah, we're just fine. It's not the end of the world. So honestly, one of the first things we bought was a Blackstone grill, because we took one with us to Peru, and it was like a godsend, because anytime power was out or anything like that, like, we could still cook, And so I think it was the PTSD that motivated us to to buy that first. But I think we owned a Blackstone before we owned a bed. So.
You meet a lot of people on Blackstone.
Yeah.
Blackstone is a great ministry tool for your neighbors. They smell it and they just come on.
Oh yeah. We Blackstone every week, multiple times, and usually it's like the neighbors come out and talk to us because they can smell it.
As I recall, a couple of your kids had health problems when you were there too, mold or whatever. Are they okay now?
That's Layla, and she still struggles with some upper respiratory stuff, but she's doing much better.
Yeah.
The city as a whole, we found we wouldn't have been able to stay long term anyway. It was producing asthma. So like, if you look at air quality ratios, compare Iowa to Lima, it's like, you can imagine it's night and day different. It's like, honestly, Debbie and I gained some perspective. And I know this sounds crazy, but like, we had a little bit of empathy for the crazy Californians in our country with all their emission standards. We were like, we could really use some emission standards here, because it was, there's just times where it would be overcast, and all the buses are like 100 years old kind of thing, and like all the cars are like coughing exhaust and not doing their thing right. And you look at these cars driving down the road, and like the taxi drivers, their cars are either very, very nice or they're like about to fall apart, and there's like almost no in between in our experience. And there's so much of that goes on, and the people there are just poor, right? So it's crazy, but socioeconomically, like Debbie and I, as making like, I think our support is like somewhere in the ballpark of $60,000 a year. So like family's sake, $60,000 a year, and that, by their standards, is a lot of money. And the problem is they've got this big, I say problem, it's just the way the culture is. It's not really a problem, it's just how they live. There's a large low class. There's a small middle class, and there's a really tiny upper class. And it just flips like a light switch almost. Like you'll drive through one community of shanties, and then boom, all of a sudden it's like, this is like a really nice side of town, and you just got 2 blocks away from where the shanties were. And so it's culturally part of the thing. And so, the public transit is there for the poor people, right? And the public transit is not funded by the government, it's a for-profit business. So you got these owner-operator bus drivers that are driving like psychopaths in a lot of ways. And they're just trying to rip through and fit as many people on the bus as they can, and they're charging them, what amounts to 35 cents for a bus ride, and so it fills the buses, and you get 40 people in a bus at 35 cents, dropping and picking up more, and so that's just how it works. And we weren't afraid to ride buses. We probably should have been, but we weren't. We hopped on buses several times without a car. So, but it's the culture, and because of that, there's so much smog in the city, and because it's in a mountainous region as well, it almost like it doesn't blow away like it should. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like you're out in the country and you got a fire and it'll just kind of blow away. Well, it doesn't quite do that.
Listen, it's half past. We probably
Oh, sorry.
close and get into the service. So